Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on ABC News Live for this very special edition of In the Kitchen, Extending the Conversation. Well, Soul of the Nation takes a deeper look at Black life in America and unveils some of those hard truths that we all have to reckon with. Each Soul of the Nation episode has a segment called In the Kitchen, where we have the same honest conversations that are common around the kitchen tables of many Black families. The conversations are so good, we wanted to keep them going.
I'm thrilled to be in the kitchen for our final episode.
Wow.
I know.
It's been great watching the show.
Thank you. We've had all these incredible conversations, but I've really been looking forward to this one because this episode is about the Reconstruction, right? And for me, I've been feeling like we've been going through all of these crises right now. We've got the pandemic. We've got the crises of race. We've got the crises of economics, and all of them seem to hit Black folks disproportionately, right? They hit our community disproportionately. And I've been having this discussion with my friends. Is it a moment? Is it a movement? Is this truly the third Reconstruction? Are we really in a Reconstruction? So Khalil, are we in the third Reconstruction?
I think we are on the edge of seeing the early returns of what could be the next Reconstruction. And that will depend in large part on what happens over the remaining days of the first 100 days of this administration. And I say that because there's been no Reconstruction in our history that was not tied to the role of the federal government in either leveling the playing field, making sure that the laws already on the books worked, or putting new ones on the books to make them work. And even in the most drastic situations, to put federal troops on the ground where they were required to ensure our safety. But we'll see soon what this moment really is going to bring in terms of the future, particularly for our kids, for our grandkids, because it's going to make a difference.
Uh-oh, I hear breathing heavy over there.
You're always in tune. Yes. What is Reconstruction without also the compromise, right? 1877, we saw a period of time, let's say when the first Reconstructions, you had the compromise. So what happened was there was all this energy and all this attention on change, on focusing on equality for Black people. And there was a lot of energy around it, a lot of federal promises, a 40-acre and a mule promise. And then what happened? The compromise happened, and what you saw were many who could be called today maybe progressives and liberals who felt sympathetic to Southern Republicans at that time, who were very invested in an antiquated and brutal system, who couldn't see a national identity without that system. So the compromise was what happened when they said, you know what, Black people are suffering, but they can wait. They can wait. And then there was another racial reckoning that happened in the 1960s. We saw another period of time where there were a lot of civil rights struggles, a lot of work around Black liberation. We saw the Voter Rights Act come out, and that was by some of the most powerful movements of our generation. And that was an incredible thing. And then we saw the same thing happen, a compromise. There was so much attention. We saw legislation pass. And then there was another compromise where just several years after the assassination of the great Martin Luther King Jr., we saw again the rollback. All of this attention and all this energy was like, yes, we want to give Black people justice and equality, but not yet.
Please wait.
We wait, we go slow. And here we are again. After what we're living in is very much the backlash from the first Black president of the United States. That was when we saw so many of these soon-to-be insurrectionists organizing, right? The FBI tells the Obama administration and really the Senate, that this is a time when many bigots are organizing themselves and arming themselves as a direct backlash to the first black president. So now the question is, are we going to compromise? Are we the generation of people that are going to compromise again? And so to us here, I believe now so much more is, maybe not so much more, but so much is possible. Right? None of us would be here if we didn't believe in possibility. And so we have to fight for that, but we have to beware that compromise that says, black people have to wait because these changes make me feel uncomfortable, right? What we're talking about now is what is the identity of America without black people on their knees? That's really what we're being challenged to think about, because every time that these changes have happened, we see a major pushback. This is all to ensure that black people don't have a voice in this country, and this is because of the monumental win. So now, after an insurrection on the Capitol and everything that we've seen, are we going to compromise? That's what we have to face.
In the Kitchen, extending the conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, extending the conversation.
So Dee, do we wait? Is this the third Reconstruction, or are we going to be asked, as is suggested, to compromise, to wait?
For me, I think, where are you at in your life when you're taking in these events, right? Reconstruction, you're rebuilding something that was torn down. And from the perspective of a lot of people, we never really had anything. So we're still like trying to catch up from how we came into this country. It's not like these insurrectionists ran into our neighborhoods and ripped them apart. They're already ripped apart. I'm from East Baltimore. I know you have history there, and you know what the city looks like, and you know what a lot of us go through. So I think about, I'm optimistic, and I think we need to have these conversations. We need to fight. We need to wake up and do everything we can for our parents, for our children, to make sure we can leave it better, than what we got. But at the same time, my mom, dad, their parents, we're American. But I'm like the first real American in my family because I can buy property. I can travel whenever I want to. I can, drink all types of fancy waters, in weird shaped bottles. I can do these things, and they couldn't do that. Right. So are we trying to, and that's just a success story, not a whole group of people experiencing success. I'm a success story no matter how many people I try to help, educate, liberate, give books to, show love to, I'm creating these little stories, but when we're talking about us as a whole, we have a lot of work to do. And it's hard for me to just imagine us building something that we just never really had.
You've mentioned resistance, Yes. What's interesting is that it just seems to me sometimes that equality feels like oppression. Yes. Right? I don't quite understand it, but it does seem to be that there is this white resistance to black progress. And we're talking about possibly a third Reconstruction. Why do you think that is, that there is always this compromise or this white resistance coming when there is the potential of black progress or even the possibility of equality?
Yeah. Such a good. This is what brings us together, and we often have this conversation. And I think there are a couple of things. I think generally, I've become more sympathetic to the use of language and what people hear when we say something. So, for example, with privilege, I would say, well, why are you getting your back up over something so simple? And then I realized that what was being said and what was being heard were two different things. I'm talking about privilege, but what many people, and many white people particularly, were hearing was when I said, hey, we're talking about white privilege, they were hearing, you're saying I've never been through anything in my life. Right? And from that vantage point, anyone is going to feel protective of their own story. We all have a story. We all have some kind of struggle. And so that reframing of, hey, privilege isn't about what you've gone through. Your story is your own. It's about what you haven't had to go through. And the whole point, I would hope, is that it's opening up the conversation. And I think fundamentally, there is a way that we're not encouraging curiosity. There isn't curiosity. We feel very sure about the world as it is, and we feel very sure about what I know about you, what I know about you, what I know about you. And when it comes down to this concept of resistance, I think this. There was a man I met on a plane once. So I get on the plane, I'm spoiled this day, right? Like I'm flying enough and I get enough points and I'm flying first, so I feel confident that I don't have to worry about carry-on space. You know, overhead space,
Yes.
not a game.
No.
Not a game.
It's serious.
Right? And so,
I will not check a bag.
you feel me?
No.
No.
You
Ever.
just won't. No. My life is literally in my hands.
Yes.
It's mine. So I get there and the space is full. I look behind me. It's empty. So I go to throw my bag up, and this older man, he pops up and he puts his hand in front of me and he says, "Do you belong? Do you belong here?"
Oh.
And yes, he was. And I thought about that moment often because, of course, everything you know crashes into the front of your
Yeah.
head, right? I'm like, what part of the 400 years should
Yeah.
I enter this conversation at?
Yeah.
Right.
And I looked at him and he looked at me and I decided not to say anything. Anyway, quick, he folds and he starts sputtering out an apology. But, I reach around and put my bag up. We go, we fly. When the flight lands, he's the first person to pull my bag down and he hands it to me. He wants me to know he's a good person.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually what people want. And this comes down to the compromise. We, Americans particularly, and we can actually say largely white Americans, they actually want to be seen as good people. So they do believe in these kinds of changes, right? That's why they support them and want to vote for them at first. But the follow through is where we get wonky. And why is that, right? There's a dissonance between being a good person and doing good things. I'm not interested in who's a good person or who isn't. I'm very interested in what we do with the time that we have. And so I think about that question often in this man of belonging. What happens when we believe that our belonging is based on who does not, right? When that's what our identity is hinged upon. And so to anyone out there who is like, I don't know, and I think about this man because what it told me is this: the ability to think for oneself, right? Like if our minds are sort of like the muscle of our souls, and that's actually what we're talking about. We're talking about the soul of the country, the soul of America. If the mind is the muscle of the soul, which is to say, the closest thing to grace within us, the ability to think for oneself and to see the world as it is, not as we were told, and to see each other as we are, not as we were told we are. That is one of the most sacred things that we can do, and the opposite, the most heinous. So what we're talking about is not activism, it's about the work of being alive, and that means being aware of what's happening around you, being part of the world, because my job is to remind everyone this. That man, if I asked him why he stood up, he wouldn't have been able to answer me, because I don't think he actually knows.
Right.
It was such a knee-jerk reaction, and my job is to remind you that we didn't get to choose what life we were born into, okay? We weren't like, right before we got here, I'm gonna swipe left on this hair, right on that skin, left on this
And
zip
what would those
code, right?
choices be?
Right, we didn't get to choose the conditions we were born into, but at some point, they do become ours, right? If we aren't changing and challenging the systems, the conditions become our own. And my job is to remind you that when we accept these conditions, we forfeit a part of who we are. And my job is to remind that cost is too high. The job of being alive, of really being alive, is to find out who you are, and we do that in service to something greater than ourselves.
In the Kitchen, extending the conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, extending the conversation.
The other side of privilege is difficult too.
Yes.
I don't know if you had this experience, but I've had, and this is like, I'm just thinking about one person in particular, but this has happened in different conversations.
Yeah.
But I've had a white person run up to me to tell me how he acknowledges his privilege so much, and he knows he has privilege, and he beat me over the head with his privilege, and I felt like like that's a privilege. Yeah. Like I was just trying to have a sandwich, and like he was telling me about his privilege, and I told him, I said, I'm glad that you acknowledge that privilege. I'm so happy for you. That you reached this point in your life. Yeah. But at the same time, white privilege points are non-transferable. So just because you tell me it doesn't mean you can advance me like 172 white privilege points and I can use them the next time I get pulled over by a police officer. Like, wait a second. Before you go, let me show you what I got, right?
That's what Monopoly is for. Get out of jail free card. You should carry it with you.
Why do you think there's so much resistance? Like, let's chat about this, because we've been talking about this on the show. You know, Ron Johnson, he's a senator. I mean, he's, you know, one of the highest positions in government. And he comes out and he says, you know, these insurrectionists, they love their country. And so I wasn't afraid when they're storming the Capitol. But hey, I may get into trouble by saying this. I always feel like when someone prefaces something like that, they know there's something wrong with what they're saying. But he says, but if they were BLM, I would have been afraid. But I'm not racist for saying that.
Well, I mean, the beauty of this moment, I mean, if a definition of beauty is to see clarity with the essence of a thing, then the beauty of this moment is that we see the naked ideology of white supremacy right in front of us. It doesn't mask itself, it's not hiding. To say I'm not a racist for this is just performative. I mean, as a historian, I mean, the work that I've done for 25 years now has been to look at the evidence, the naked truth of white people shaping the world in their image, justifying it in their science, in their politics, in their journalism, in their education systems, every step along the way until magically in 1965, the language begins to change. And so we're living with a performance that has been going on for half a century for a lot of the country. I mean, you don't get to mass incarceration where you have the biggest punishment system the world has ever known that's disproportionately black and brown, 70% in those categories, where once before the 1970s, it was 70% white. Without the systems continuing to operate, or in this case being, I should say, revised, rebooted, you know, 2.0 for the purposes of systemic racism. They are playing out the performance of white supremacy that in words, in letters, in deeds, were so crystal clear in the late 19th century, in the early 20th century, when young people got their Confederate flags and stood on the side of the highway, when civil rights marchers were going. I mean, literally, it doesn't take that much time to go back into our own parents' lifetimes, my parents, your parents, everyone here, to see the naked face of racism. And so let's not get confused, right? It's all performance.
He really doesn't believe he's racist, I think.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
I think that it doesn't matter whether he does or doesn't. You know, I think that is something that, again, this idea of good person. I have no interest in seeing people as good or bad anymore. I've learned that that doesn't serve, that doesn't allow for redemption, that doesn't allow room for growth. It's something that we could end up turning and have at different times on each other as well. This doesn't mean that I allow him grace. It means I'm not thinking about him at all. I'm thinking about what the words that he says, how are they going to shape what we understand? What does it tell me? Who believes it and why? You know, Sunny, one of the things that has really stressed me out was after this insurrection, which is something we can say now.
Yeah.
After the insurrection, I saw a lot of, we've got to reach across the aisle.
Yes.
And I never
and understand.
That's right. And I had to think about that because I think sometimes I know that's like a thing. It's like a thing. We got to reach across the aisle.
Yeah.
Goes back to the compromise. I wonder this. Why is it so much easier for many white people in this country to see themselves in a bigot before they do a black person? That's what I want to know. How is it that we have come to a place where, you know, people say to talk about race, it's all you think about. You're racially charged.
Yes.
You're motivated by this. You're playing the race card. But I wonder, are we? Are we? I can look at someone and see them as a full person. In fact, I would say that the majority of black people in America could. Why? Let's go back to when we were seeking a Democratic candidate. Who got the majority of the votes? Sanders and Warren. Why not Booker and Kamala Harris, if not if not for just a complete, absolute relationship to race. It's because of the values. It's the values and the beliefs that they had that we supported. And there is something, I think, there is an allegiance to whiteness that I think many white people have to betray. And my thing, again, is each and every one of us, we're born into a script. We are. The same way that we're sort of born into conditions, we're born into a script. And I would dare say for a lot of people here, many people watching, to accept the script as it was would have been to accept our own destruction, right? That's what movements are. It's about rewriting the script that we were born into. So many of us, we step off script. That's all this time is, an invitation to step off script. This particular project that you think serves you actually makes you complacent. Where is the space for curiosity and courage? Because I'm telling you that complacency is the death of the soul. You lose a part of who you are in service of something that you think serves you, but actually is a kind of decaying. And so I want us to get to that question. What happens? Why is it easier for so many people to see themselves in a bigot before a black person?
We are in America, and it is competitive, and being white gives you an advantage.
That's
and if capitalism is competitive, you're not gonna give away any advantages. So if you're telling me that I can advance quicker because I look like this, or talk like this, or move like this in the country where everything is about gain, 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 why am I gonna be giving that away?
I do think that the pandemic has challenged some of that, though, Dee. I wonder if you do too. It's that why suddenly this care about, and of course he deserves it, and so does Breonna, but George Floyd. This movement, Black Lives Matter, had been around for years. Years and years, 60 years I think at the time. And it was this particular moment, and I think there was something that people thought that they were paying into a system for protection and instead got precarity in the time of pandemic. And I do believe that some of the tenets, these American gods, you know, greed, even doctors and nurses, that was who we were supposed to aspire to be, who were seen as disposable by the administration prior. It didn't matter whether they were a doctor, they were treated the same as an essential worker. Everyone had met that. And I wonder if you think that the pandemic has sort of created a window or a gap in that narrative.
Everybody still asks me for money just like they did before the pandemic. Like everybody's trying to get paid. And I feel you, because I do feel like I've been like more vulnerable and emotional in a whole lot of different ways since this time has been going on. However, I feel like Ron Johnson, I do feel like he is subscribing to everything that benefits him. And I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say, is that narrative, the BLM is evil, mean, whatever, these other people were good patriots who, you know, were attacking cops in government buildings, you know, that is all ties into the advantages that allows a person like him to exist. Because based on his thoughts and what he says, we should not know who he is. He should never come across our radar, but those things allow him to hold up this space.
In the Kitchen, extending the conversation continues on ABC News Live after the break. Welcome back to the Kitchen, extending the conversation.
So less than 10% of black folks have gotten the vaccine, have been vaccinated. What are your thoughts about that? Why the inequity there?
Yeah. You know, and to Khalil's point, this is a manufactured reality. It's not by accident, or it's not because black people don't want the vaccine or don't want, that's like black people don't want to be safe. And even with hesitancy, right? Because this is not a country that has been careful with black people or safe with black people. Even with that reality, black people want the vaccine. And the reason why that myth exists is to say, again, this is your fault, to detract from the fact that this is simply a manufactured reality. What this pandemic has done has revealed, I think, these injustices that were so gross, that were just gestured at before, because there are assumptions in this country that are so deeply held they need scarcely be acknowledged. And one of those assumptions on a basic level that is true of this vaccine, that is true with realities like police brutality, and every other kind of pandemic that is plaguing Black people in this country. It comes down to this belief that Black people must have done something to deserve what happens to them, right? That Black people are doing something, and therefore that is why they're not getting the vaccine. They don't believe in the vaccine, so they're not getting the vaccine. And that is, at the heart of it, a lie. And the reason why this sort of myth exists, I think, is, I mean, it's a vicious thing, right? It's the same myth that's used to say that George Floyd deserved it. It's why we have that knee-jerk reaction. Well, what did they do to make that thing happen? This is the very same logic. What are Black people doing so that that less than 10% of us are getting the vaccine? And actually what we are doing is fighting to get access to the vaccine. We're fighting for the rollout. And so this pandemic, like many crises, it reveals this manufactured reality that marginalizes people and blames them for that marginalization. And I do want to say, Sunny, and Dee and Khalil, there's just something here that why this resistance, right? That was the key word, why this resistance. And I think that on some level, because we're still in a time in 2021, in the digital age, where we're fighting to prove that slavery existed, right? Whose legacy we live within today. And I think on some level, there's the question of this. If what you're saying is true and we did all the things that you say that we did to you, how is it that you're still here? If we did all the things that you say that we did, how could you be in the position that you're in? Why aren't you destroyed? And I mean, that is part of the tradition that we carry. Some people inherit wealth in this country, others inherit struggle. Not to say these things are mutually exclusive, but mostly they are. But it comes down to these same things, these manufactured realities that systematically and systemically exclude our full participation, and then that inability to access is then blamed on our inabilities, our personal failures. And no, this is very much on purpose. We are kept out of it, and I think that we have to have a sort of, I hope that we're having a kind of reckoning for this, because now we're actually talking about very casually throwing people's lives away. We've already seen more than 500,000 people die disproportionately, people of color, Black people. And we've got to say enough is enough, that these myths that we're clinging to, that they're dangerous, they're violent, and they come at too high a cost.
And Dee, I wonder what you're thinking, because we have heard this thing, Black people don't trust the vaccine, and that's why they're not getting it, as opposed to it's just not being made available.
Yeah, I think that's an easier narrative to sell to the greater population. I think regardless of what color you are, you're gonna have some apprehension, and there's gonna be some fear because it's brand new. We don't know. All of this stuff is new. We never lived through a pandemic before. Like, this is like the first time a lot of us are really seeing how important voting really is and having leadership that can handle a situation like this versus leadership who would think it's a joke or a tweet or something to play around with, right? I think when you look at our experience in this country, and just to echo on what everyone has been saying throughout this whole conversation, where do Black people get special treatment in this country? I mean, in every category across the board, from the rates on our mortgages to the infant mortality rate to the amount of us locked up, we get the short end of the stick. If it's bad, it's gonna come at us, and we have to figure out a way to survive and thrive and deal with it. So this vaccine and how it's being rolled out is no different. The governor from Maryland said that the city of Baltimore has already had too much. That was like crazy when everybody in the state Baltimore's the biggest city municipality in the whole state, and our institution, Johns Hopkins Hospital and University, are treating everybody. So like everybody's pouring into the city to get those shots, and the residents can't get them in a predominantly black city, and then you feel like you should use your time in your press conference to talk about how we got too many. And it's just the same thing across the board. And, you know, and we always figure out a way to make it. We always do. We here, you know, we always figure out a way. We gonna get it. We gonna get there. We gonna get there.
I love that. When is the moment that you knew you were black?
Well, I mean, as a product of a very black South Side of Chicago, I don't imagine a moment before not knowing. But I did have an experience as a very young child. I was headed to kindergarten. My mother was part of a first generation of black teachers who were desegregating Chicago being one of the most segregated cities in America. So she worked out a special deal with the new black principal of an all-white school on the north side of Chicago. Can I bring my kindergarten son with me? It'll be easier for me. This will be great. We were thick as thieves anyway, Mom and me. So he said yes. Arrived to the school within a day. There's an uproar. A local firefighter decides to organize a community meeting to say that this black boy doesn't belong in this school. To which my mother tried to appeal to their kindness and to say, look, you know, I'm a new teacher here. He's a great kid. Absolutely not. They went to the principal, said, correct your mistake.
Wow.
Next day I was gone, and that was the end of it. I went to the local school that was in my district, which was the quote-unquote rules, but it was a formative experience for me. I went on at that same local school not to say the Pledge of Allegiance for the rest of my childhood. No, because you know it was foundational to how I saw myself in relationship to a nation, where this sort of thing, even for a very small child, was unfair, was unjust, and that, you know, that was my early kneeling moment.
Yeah, no Pledge of Allegiance for you.
No Pledge of Allegiance for me.
No. I hear that. When was the moment that you knew you were black?
You know, I think of this because, you know, luckily I had the chance to know this question was coming.
I've been asking it of everyone.
Yes, and I think of it kind of a little bit like coming out. I think people think it happens all at once in this really big way, but actually you do it again and again and again and again and again. And I think that my relationship to my blackness is the same. There are the kinds, I think it goes back to Douglas's, you know, that double consciousness, or Du Bois rather, that double consciousness that happens where you are who you are, and you're also who the world sees you as, and you're constantly grappling with that. And so the first time that I really understood that I was black, actually, you know, because I grew up in a black neighborhood, so everybody was, but was around my hair. I have a twin sister, and her hair grows like this, and my hair grows like this. Luckily, the twist out, right? My hair. So it was understood that somebody had good hair. My sister had good hair, and I had bad hair. I had black hair, and that was one of the first times that I came to understand myself as a specific kind of black person. But I think, you know, there are so many moments again where you learn. You know, the time where I got called the N-word on a bus, the time when I spent my first real time in a black community that was talking about black liberation, the first time that I read, you know, Angela Davis. There are so many times and so many ways that you have to, and when I say have to, I don't even force, it's almost like it's a beautiful experience too. It's not just living in the gaze, it's defying it. You know, it's the audacity that you can have. And so I have learned that I am black again and again and again and again on the path to a kind of actualization, power, liberation, and I mean, I think it's the best experience in the world, even with all the hardship.
That's one thing about America, they're gonna let you know you black.
Yeah.
They're gonna work hard at that.
I'm sitting here obsessed with your hair and thinking, well, what does she do with it? What does she put in it?
Yeah. Right.
Let me ask you, Dee, when was the moment when you knew you were black?
I wish I had a really cool story like Don Cornelius came to me in a dream and like gave me a silk sweatsuit or something like that. But, you know, being from Baltimore, which is it's a predominantly black city, it's an extremely segregated. I've never had white peers. Like I didn't really start meeting white people until I was like 20. Other than like police officers and teachers, you know, you don't really meet people who aren't black. So. And we always taught that we're from the bottom, we're from the bottom, we're from the bottom. But one thing I do remember that just sticks out is Martin O'Malley was the mayor and they was moving this festival to Fells Point. And I never forget this story because it's the most strange, it's a really strange thing that happened to me. But there's a little projects right next to Fells Point called Perkins, and I'm not from Perkins. I was gonna play basketball with a friend, and I must say I'm not from Perkins because just ride with me. I love it, and I love my brothers from Perkins. I love them, but I'm not from Perkins, and this is what makes me upset. They didn't want the people from their projects to intermix with these people at this little festival in Fells Point. So they brought 2 cheese buses and parked them right on the side of the projects, and they locked us all up. And we sat for like 2 days, no charges, no paperwork, no nothing. Until when we came home, the little festival that I wasn't gonna go to because I didn't want to go to the festival because I had no interest in festivals. And I was only in Perkins to play basketball because I'm from down the hill. I'm not from Perkins, but we had to sit for that. And you know, you could get locked up for hooping.
Wow.
This is how it works.
That's incredible.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm Sunny Hostin, and this is our final week in the kitchen. Thank you for tuning in and continuing to support Soul of a Nation and our family kitchen discussions every week. We feel the love. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, it's just goodbye for now.
Don't go anywhere. There's much more of ABC News Live still ahead.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.